Yeah, thanks so much, Joy. We appreciate those initial remarks and thrilled to be here. And a big thanks to ARCA for inviting both Chris and I to talk on what we think is a really important and cutting edge topic in the field. I'm Dr. Paul Bourgeois. I'm an associate professor of counseling at the University of New Haven. I'm also a vocational expert and life care planner alongside Chris at Kincaid Wolstein Voc Rehab. Chris, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Christopher Skerritt. I have the fortunate honor of also having Paul as a former rehabilitation counseling professor back in the day. His age does deceive people. It's been what, 10 years something? I don't know. I always I do the 2015 and then I minus it. But anyway, yeah, I'm based in Rhode Island. Paul's up in Massachusetts. I do the vocational work. I also do some forensic economics, life care planning, a little bit of everything. But the key function being that AI helps me do my job better. So I'm happy to talk about what I do, so you guys can also do it. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And I think a good time to get right into the learning objectives for today's discussion. Yeah, and just a note for folks, you can turn off and on um, your microphone. So unless you have a question and want to raise your hand, if we could keep those turned off. And as Joy mentioned, we'll monitor the chat. So please feel free in real time to ask your question, and we'll address those as appropriate. So in terms of the learning goals today, our intent is to help folks better understand some of the fundamental concepts that are important to know about as it relates to the use of artificial intelligence. And one thing to note, Chris and I are not computer science experts. And, while Chris is very tech savvy, both of us are trained rehabilitation counselors. And as Chris noted, have come to really appreciate the use of AI in the work that we do. And we'll share some of those experiences with you today. So we're going to talk about, what is AI, why it matters, some of the buzzwords like machine learning and deep learning, put it into context historically. We'll talk about different types of AI technologies and their applications, share some commonly used technologies that we utilize as part of our practice, and hopefully give you a sense of how AI is being utilized across a variety of industries, including healthcare and certainly in the work that we do. We want to make sure that folks have a sense of how to access and utilize these basic tools. So we'll share with you a short list of low cost and free applications that Chris and I use for a variety of purposes in our role, and ultimately to better understand and how you can integrate those into the work that you do as a rehabilitation professional. Certainly including improved efficiency and helping for data analysis, but also many challenges in terms of integration and better understanding some of the ethical considerations and challenges will be addressed in the presentation as well. So those are the learning objectives for today. And I want to start to note that we have about an hour, a little bit less now, certainly not enough to cover all of the nuance and specific applications and considerations of AI. So we do want to refer people to the literature and some of what Chris and I and our colleagues have put together in terms of the use of AI in the field of rehab counseling. So snap a picture of this. These are articles either published or in process that provide some additional context that might be outside the scope of what we're talking about today. We wanted to start the discussion as well to provide some information, some data on a study that Chris and I are actively pulling together. So this is preliminary data from a survey of about 1,000 CRCs we sent out. We got about a 15% response rate, so call it 100 or 150 or so respondents, asking them specifically about their lived experiences with artificial intelligence, their perspectives and concerns, and as is listed on the screen here, wanted to capture some of the kind of big picture data to really provide the framework for our discussion today. So most folks, and this is on a 5-point Likert scale, not much familiarity with AI, and anecdotally, this is consistent with Chris and my experience and going to different conferences and talking to people informally. I think folks have a sense of it's out there. It's hard to escape the buzz term in the news, but in terms of using it and direct applications in our work, folks are feeling both unfamiliar and lacking confidence in using AI. And I suspect part of the reason why ARCA and other professional organizations are really interested in having these talks is reflected in the data here. Similarly, the lack of training opportunities, the lack of ability to understand, again, the direct application of AI in our work is reflected in this data. Two, some of the concerns that folks have, lots of concern regarding the ethical use of and the data security of AI, and in particular, the confidentiality piece and where's this data going and how's it being used. We'll address that today. Definitely some concern about losing the personal touch, having a machine do the work or making the judgment calls, a big concern from folks in our data set. And that said, some optimism in terms of how we can use it, what use cases are appropriate for rehabilitation counselors and rehab professionals. We also asked some questions about kind of how you see AI in rehab counseling and what impacts you think it's going to have on the field. And we'll unpack this a little bit as we work our way through the talk today, but a lot of optimism on the ability to automate administrative tasks, talking about note-taking and treatment planning, and we'll share a little bit later on exactly how we do this. A lot of application in terms of it being useful for accessibility purposes, working with our clients or consumers to help them better understand how they might be able to utilize this technology in their role and function. And then again, to reiterate some of the concerns in the qualitative data reflected here related to ethics, data privacy, misinformation. We'll share some information today about how you can mitigate that, and a healthy bit of skepticism and uncertainty. So all of this kind of, the hope is to frame our discussion today that I think like learning more, they see the upside to using it, but lots of concerns that we're going to address hopefully in detail today. Anything to add here, Chris, in terms of the research literature or?
Yeah. I think the other just scope to go into today is understanding like this is I think I said this during the last presentation. I'm fortunate that I haven't had any major technological changes in my career as a rehabilitation counselor. However, some individuals in the field have had to deal with implementation of the computer, implementation of email, all these different at the time massive tech challenges. This is just that next iteration of it. So as much as it is more comfortable to be avoidant of it and to want to not integrate it or even test it out due to perceived technological barriers, it's important to just start really small with how you're using it. It doesn't even have to be directly related to rehabilitation counseling. Paul and I discuss how we use it in our personal lives sometimes. I use it for putting together vegetarian recipes for my wife and I. She says my cooking has never been better, and so now I'm committed to it. Paul used it. You want to explain how you use it in your personal life?
Yeah, you can really use it for, I coach my kids' soccer team, putting together drills and organizing practices. And, when we get into later the idea of integrating AI, we'll start here by just saying playing around with it and building up your repetitions and using it, whether in a professional or personal sense, is really important to get comfortable. And to Chris's point, this is the next iteration of the advancement of technology. And just like folks got used to using email and using software packages like SkillTran and Microsky to do their transferable skills analyses, for example, this is just the next iteration. So let's start with the fundamentals and some of the kind of foundational concepts to set the stage for what's to come. You've read about it, you've heard about it in the news, and lots of definitions, and one that we boiled down here is AI being computer systems essentially performing tasks that typically require human intelligence. And many, many, many applications that we'll talk about here, but ultimately the idea is to replicate what humans can do in terms of their thinking and processing. To provide a sense of the history, this has not come out of nowhere. This isn't a technology that showed up all of a sudden, although it may feel that way. The latest iterations of it, where you're able to converse with or chat, as it were, and thinking about the chat GPTs, have really only come into existence where lay people like us in the last 18 months or so have been able to utilize these systems. But the idea of artificial intelligence, the idea of computers mimicking human intelligence has been around for decades. I'm sure many of you have heard of Alan Turing and the Dartmouth Conference and early iterations of the idea of artificial intelligence, again dating back to the 40s and 50s. So in general, not a new concept, but up until recently, one would have to have a degree in computer science or coding or have the ability to speak computer language, for lack of a better way to put it, until now, where we can converse with these chatbots. Anything to add here, Chris?
Just that, much like with how rehabilitation counseling started by, helping, individuals coming back from war, finding jobs, adjustments, so on and so forth. Same thing with AI, believe it or not. I believe it was it was the code breakers, right? It was being able to decipher radio frequencies coming in and out of, I think it was World War II. That was like one of the
Enigma
first
codes.
Yeah, Enigma codes. Yep. That was one of the first instances in which they were mimicking, because we're trying to mimic the intelligence of people being able to decipher codes, and even going back as far as like the census. Like that's how far back we're going with regards to being able to implement these types of algorithms and being able to use it to our benefit to help automate and make our lives easier. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and just to put a pin in this, the goal here is to share with folks that this, again, didn't come out of nowhere, that it's the natural progression and next iteration in the use of technology. So it's here, it's not going anywhere, and it's incumbent on us as professionals to better understand the implications it has for our field.
Perfect.
So a couple pieces of terminology here, again, just to provide the context and foundational information for what's to come. When we're talking about AI, we're talking about this broad concept of machines simulating the different cognitive functions of a human being. And kind of underneath that broad umbrella of AI, you've probably seen these other terms, the idea of machine learning. And this is essentially zeros and ones and algorithms being used to understand, and again, in quotes here, learn the patterns that come from the data that it's been provided. And ultimately, it's making predictions or decisions, again, based on the algorithm. You may have also heard of this idea of deep learning. And when I think of deep learning, as we have noted in the description here, kind of mimicking human brain structures and thinking about kind of neural networks and working together. And we'll talk later, applications of this like computer vision and being able to identify and understand pictures as an example. certainly important in some use cases as far as AI is concerned. Anything to add here, Chris?
No, just that being mindful of you already have a lot of this going on in your everyday life. So, for instance, Amazon, right? When you buy something on Amazon, the algorithm's going to say, "Hey, you might like these," right? And same thing for like Netflix, that recommendation system. Those are all different things, parts of AI. It's just how they frame it with regards to you know how it's going to help you and so on and so forth. So again, just looking at it from a bird's eye view, it's you're already dealing with it every day. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And I think what we're describing here and is listed on the screen, this idea of narrow or weak AI, and those are the things that Chris just described. The chat bots, the personal assistants, the spam filters you get in your email, the recommendations you get from Netflix, the Siris or Alexas, being able to provide services at the your beck and call, as it were. And when we talk about narrow AI, we're talking about very specific systems designed for specific tasks. And we're going to talk about some of those specific tasks and use cases in the field of rehab counseling. But we see this across industries. You may have read about AI being employed in healthcare as a form of diagnostics, being applied in finance and other sectors, and the natural evolution of the technology certainly lends itself well to the work that we do as rehabilitation professionals. So the point here again is AI is it's ubiquitous at this point. It's embedded into everything. So whether you use the Google platform or if you're a Microsoft user, I'm sure you've seen and are well aware of all of the embedded AI tools. Whether you've used them or not is a different question, but again, AI is here and not going anywhere. So on the other end of the spectrum, is this idea of general or strong AI, and this is the Terminator Skynet scenario, where AI becomes super intelligent, and it's this hypothetical scenario where they're able to do everything that a human does across the board. As is listed on the screen here, the feasibility of this is still in question, and we bring it up largely to draw the distinction between what we're doing as rehab professionals and using it in a very narrow and specific way versus, again, the idea of Terminator and Skynet, which is not what we're discussing. Anything to add here, Chris?
Yeah. So even though we do talk about this theoretical concept of strong AI, it is still a very actual threat that is something that the government and pretty much everybody that's involved in this space is aware of, and it's more or less because that the technology could be evolved to eventually, take advantage of people. Like you've seen probably when ChatGPT first came out, there were instances of people like faking phone calls, doing all of that. So, imagine that on like a global scale. That's where those threats come in. And now it's this kind of geopolitical issue going on between us and China and all that stuff. And we don't need to get into that now, but, just keep in mind that there is some safety precautions that need to go in order for us to be able to effectively use it safely. So yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Chris. And beyond the scope of today's discussion, that said, we do want to talk a bit about the current AI technologies that are available and that are usable for folks in this room and for rehab pros in general. Some other terms you've probably heard, this idea of natural language processing. And this is the term that describes these large language models and their ability to understand and generate human language. And these models, again, I'm sure you've read about in the news, have been trained on trillions with a T data points. And we like to think of it and describe it as this very large forest, with lots of trees and all of the information, that you could possibly have scraped from the internet embedded in these models that we can then use to help, again, identify patterns and utilize for a variety of use cases that we'll describe in just a little bit. So this is where we can ask questions and get responses. And again, we'll talk more about that. Other AI technologies that you may be using or have heard of is this idea of computer vision, being able to identify and classify objects and images or videos. We see a lot of this in the healthcare space, thinking about diagnostic tools, thinking about oncology, for example, and looking at scans and being able to identify benign versus cancerous tumors is one example here. One use case that Chris and I use frequently in our role as life care planners in particular, trying to decipher or better understand the chicken scratch handwriting of some physicians, being able to utilize computer vision and these AI systems to help understand what those terms are and what the doctor is trying to say.
I still have that. Do you want me to pull that up? I think I have it on my desktop from last week, just to give an example for
Yeah, sure.
the chicken scratch. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me pull that. Hold on. I'm not doing it with the Zoom today. I was figured out the annotate thing yesterday, and that's been a doozy. But all right. So this is an example. I know it's not the best, but if you were to go into ChatGPT under the vision function and you were to say, look at this and tell me what you think it says, it could actually do that in some instances. So for this one, I think it was Lexapro, I think was the second one. And then it was 20 milligrams. And I forgot, what was the first one, Paul?
I'm not seeing it on the screen, Chris.
Oh, is it not popping up? Oh, did I not confirm it? Hold on. Hold on. All right. Let's move on from this because
yeah, why don't we skip it? But
yeah.
the idea is essentially
Sounds good.
being able to use, and I have ChatGPT on my phone. You can take a picture of that chicken scratch, and it will help you to, again, better understand, what's written there. Robotic process automation. This is one that's exciting, and we should have prefaced, I think, that this is a constantly evolving and fluid topical area. And just in the past week, ChatGPT and OpenAI released an operator function that allows you to do these repetitive tasks and aligns with your workflow. And to say that differently now, you can ask it to book a flight for you. You can ask it to send out emails on whatever scheduled function. You can have it do any number of things. And we'll talk later about some use cases specific to rehabilitation professionals. All right, moving right along, and some of this we'll skip over just for time's sake, but again, in your smartphones, whether it's facial recognition or speech to text, all of those recommendations we get on entertainment platforms, things like Google Maps and Waze, all use AI to help provide real-time traffic prediction. So it's here. Again, it's not going anywhere. It's embedded into your everyday life. And, our goal is to help you better understand how you can utilize it in practice. So in looking at AI in healthcare and rehab, we've kind of alluded to this and foreshadowed the idea of using AI to help predict treatment outcomes or risk factors. Now it's being used on hospital floors to monitor and essentially predict based on vital data, who might be most at risk of having a complication or an issue. Lots of voice-enabled virtual assistants and chatbots, and the ability to provide remote monitoring of patients connected directly to the physician. Again, using AI to help organize and streamline that whole process. And we noted already the idea of being able to utilize it for appointment scheduling, for folks that do claims processing, all of these repetitive tasks related to administrative work. Lots of use cases there. So getting right into popular AI tools, and Chris and I are not paid representatives of any of these companies, but these are platforms that are available and I suppose the biggest names and the biggest platforms in the space. So I suspect you've all heard of ChatGPT. This is through OpenAI, which is a general purpose AI that you can use for a variety of use cases. We have the link on the board here for folks that want to sign up. There's a variety of profiles that you can create. There's the free version, which we'll talk about later, is one that we would caution folks on for a variety of reasons. But for one, it's their kind of lowest level model or least intelligent. And for folks that are going to be using this as part of their workflow, we would encourage you to have the paid version or the enterprise version, which provides the latest AI models to you as the user, but also provides an added layer of security and protection that the free versions do not. So we'll talk in a little bit of how we use this. Some folks
can I just add something quick, Paul?
Yeah, please.
The other thing too, when it comes to just costs, because I know sometimes people think, oh, $20 a month, this, that. Just think of it like how, like if you have to pay for like Microsoft Word or you have to pay for something else related to like your direct business, depending on the setting that you're in. This doesn't constitute tax advice, but I write mine off as a business expense, and I imagine you guys can too, as long as you're able to justify how you're using it. So just keep that in the back of your head if you're going to go sign up and buy it. Keep the receipts.
Yeah, really good advice, Chris. So some other tools that are again kind of the larger platforms. Google Gemini is one, and our company at Kincaid Wolstein, we use Google as our kind of platform and embedded into all of those tools, whether it's Gmail or your Google Drive. This is now standard and embedded into all of those workspaces. So if you're interested, you can check out Google. Similarly, Microsoft's version is called Copilot, one that now is embedded. If you've had an update recently, they've now replaced the cursor in Word with the Copilot symbol. So it's literally embedded on every line of my Microsoft Word and gives me the option to utilize it for a variety of features, but also embedded into Excel and your PowerPoints, and can be used for a variety of use cases that, again, we'll talk about in a bit.
The visualize table function is probably the best one of it. I've used it like 15 times in the last like day. So just look that
talk
up
about that
if you guys want that. Yeah. So
a really good use case. Here's some other free tools, and Chris and I understand that like any new technology, it's sort of like the Wild West, and there's lots and lots of potential platforms and softwares that you can use. So we opted to put a list together of the tools that we use for a variety of purposes. And working for a small business, folks, we utilize these tools for a variety of purposes. So whether it's Grammarly for assisting with grammar and spelling, utilizing things like Synthesia, for folks that are interested in making videos for marketing or educational purposes. Many folks maybe have seen Fireflies. This is really helpful for your online Zoom or equivalent meetings to help with note taking. So these are just a few of the ones that we use in practice, and we think are really good for the purposes that are listed. That said, you get what you pay for typically, and there are a number of paid AI tools that we use similarly in our role and function from day to day. And often these will give you a bit more processing power, access to the most updated and powerful language models. And as I noted earlier, often come with an added layer of protection and security that is, of course, so important to the work that we do. So these are just a few of the many, many, many tools that are out there, and we encourage folks to play around, as it were, and find out, what works well for them. So how might you get started? For folks that maybe have never used AI or, are just getting started with it, we would encourage folks to play around with those free trial offers that are often made available. Lots of educational resources are free and easy to access online. Similarly, many community forums that will help with some of those initial questions that one might have about the basics. And as we noted earlier, and in the survey data, one of the areas that was highlighted is just the lack of resources and the lack of availability of this information. And certainly something that Chris and I are motivated to bring to this space. So take a look at signing up for these, and you may be able to get some free offers or free credits depending on the site. So you're often going to find some pretty basic navigation and functional pieces to these sites, and you're going to find dashboards, input fields. This is like the Google box, so to speak. And most of them work in a very similar way, right? We're conversing with and chatting with these tools. If we're thinking about the ChatGPTs or the Geminis of the world, and we'll talk in a moment about how we go about doing it. One important tool, and kind of beyond the scope of today's discussion, and could certainly be an hour-long training in itself, is this idea of prompt engineering. And the prompt is the actual text that you put into the input fields, whether you're asking a question or asking it to analyze data, and the ability to converse with an efficient way is essentially what prompt engineering is all about. How can we ask the right question or provide the right data in order to get the right result? This comes with practice and many iterations, and something that we would encourage folks to add to the top of their list. It's one thing to be able to access the technology and the software, but being able to do it in an appropriate and efficient way to ultimately get the results that you're looking for. These are two different things. So there's lots of documentation, tutorials that are out there, and other support forums that we would encourage folks to engage with.
I just wanted to add in quick, Paul, that in terms of, because I've done it, I think other people have done it in terms of finding like the best prompt to be able to feed into ChatGPT to be able to get what you're looking for. You can actually ask, and we're using ChatGPT, you can insert any AI tool that you want in there, but you can ask it like to structure the prompt for you to deliver the best results. So you would do a separate chat window and say, say you're looking to develop a resume for somebody or do something, to that extent. You could say, you're an expert prompt engineer, please help me with structuring a prompt. And then, take that prompt, be able to save it for future use, and then open up a new chat window to be able to do that. So when in doubt, you can ask it questions and it will actually inform you on how to better engineer a prompt. A lot of people don't realize that, and you find them going to like random places on the web to be able to get that info. So it's all right in your dashboard.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Chris. So after you've kind of identified the platform that you want to use, and you've explored some of those training materials that we talked about on the prior slide, from our perspective, the next step is really thinking about how you might incorporate the use of AI and its many applications into the work that you do and your workflow in general. So, we like to think about those tasks that are really time consuming, that take you away from being able to engage with your clients or consumers. And this is often the documentation, the report writing, the scheduling of meetings or consults, et cetera. And taking a look at, your specific work role and function, and identifying ahead of time where you think this might be a good fit can be really helpful. So whether it's your health record system, your case management platform, all of these tools that you use in your work role. Be thinking about, how might I be able to embed this into this specific function. We'd also encourage folks to put together kind of a pilot program and start small. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew, as it were, and identifying kind of small use cases within your work is a really good way to get started. And one area we might encourage is this idea of summarizing progress notes or generating client intake forms for those folks that do a lot of interviews and take a whole lot of bullet points or handwritten notes. ChatGPT and these other AIs can be really helpful in helping to organize and synthesize that data, reduce error rates, and ultimately help you to save time. And we'll talk in a little bit, some of the protocols that Chris and I use to sanitize the information, to remove any personally identifiable information, but really helpful here, to take your notes and to then be able to manipulate that information as needed. So to say that differently, maybe you, like I, take my notes in a kind of pre-populated form, and there's a lot of bullet points and there's a lot of shorthand to be able to take that and very quickly summarize it or transform it into a narrative paragraph or to translate it into a table. The ChatGPTs and other AIs are very, very adept at helping one to do that. So start small, find something that will be helpful for you within your workflow to cut down your time on, and that's usually a good place to start. Coupled with our comments earlier about whether it's your vegan dinner recipes, your soccer plan for your 5-year-old, or fill in the blank, the more you use it, the more efficient you'll get. One thing that's certainly lacking in this space is the idea of policies, and we'll get later to the lack of ethical standards that reflect the use of AI in our professional space, but something to be thinking about for folks that are planning to implement or integrate AI into their organization. What are your policies? How are you going to use it? What are the guidelines for its use? All things to be thinking about and consider ahead of time to ensure that whether you or your employees or colleagues are using it in an appropriate way. Anything to add here, Chris?
So I see some people in the chat are asking about the ethical guidelines and stuff, which we'll get in. We'll make sure that we touch on that in terms of not unintentionally committing PII or PHI violations. One thing I want to preface is specifically on ChatGPT, if you were to go into your settings, you can turn off the training option on there. So you'll see on the settings, it'll say there'll be a little tab up top that says let OpenAI train on your prompts. You turn that off and you say no, and that helps with making sure that the data does stay contained within the environment. However, it's still not a foolproof thing, but we'll get into that when we get to that part of the presentation. So
yeah, and I think we might skip right towards that part, Chris, and looking at the time as I scan here, and again, folks can take a look. Just the benefits here and thinking about efficiency and productivity, being able to enhance your data analysis, being able to use those algorithms to help identify patterns and themes within your data, improving outcomes, customizing and personalizing, increasing your accuracy, removing user errors, all benefits of AI. It takes some time and there's a learning curve here, but again, being able to integrate it small and in a slow way is our recommendation here. Again, I'm skipping along quickly to make sure that we have an opportunity. Great to get to exactly this slide. So lots of ethical considerations as it relates to the use of AI, and let's get into it. So the first piece here related to privacy and data. To be totally and completely direct, ChatGPT is not HIPAA compliant. So we, by no way, shape, or form, are encouraging folks to take unsanitized or unredacted client reports or medical records or the like, and dropping it directly in there, as that would certainly be a breach of privacy and security and a violation of HIPAA. What Chris and I do, and we suspect many others in this space that are utilizing the platform do, is to sanitize that information so that we're not including it as part of our prompt or inputting that information into the platform. So what do we mean by that? It might be using the redact function if you're using a PDF file and going through and removing again all that personally identifiable information and that sensitive information so that you're just getting all of the other info that you can then use and manipulate. And understanding again right up front that ChatGPT and other tools are not HIPAA compliant is really important, and taking the steps to ensure that again you're sanitizing that information. Beyond the scope of today's discussion, but there's certainly ways in which you can access the strengths and the uses of AI. I'm thinking of API connections, and some of the larger healthcare firms have their own kind of embedded language models. There's things we can do here to ensure that we're properly considering HIPAA. Anything to add here, Chris, on privacy and data security?
So I would say that it's not HIPAA necessarily, but if you do the GPT teams, which is where you pay per seat, they do have SOC 3 compliance, which is the same level of compliance that like Skilltran has, for example. That is just something to keep in mind if you do, you own a company and you want to make sure that you have that upper level of security. It's still, don't put health information in there, but that is something that you could do today to be able to secure, at least with the names and everything. Yeah, so
Yeah, and that SOC 3 compliance, you can look that up, but essentially, any financial institution, healthcare institution, any institution that's using cloud storage or cloud platforms are all SOC 3 compliant. Certainly something that's important when we think about privacy and data security. So thinking about in advance, what are your encryption protocols, when the data's in transit, again, when you're sending and receiving information, when it's at rest on your computer or server, we would encourage, role-based access controls, making sure that only authorized staff can access it. And as we noted, de-identifying or using pseudonyms is really important here as you're inputting information. The idea of bias and fairness is another important issue here, noting that the data that these algorithms have been trained on, often underrepresent certain disabilities or ethnicities or socioeconomic backgrounds. So being able to understand that there are some blind spots, and then we'll talk in a minute, the idea of making sure that you're not totally removing the clinical judgment and the human judgment um, from the results and utilizing them in practice. Some examples on the screens here of how this might happen in practice, tools matching or mismatching jobs, or making suggestions that don't fully account for some of the nuance of a particular disability, for example. So being able to audit that, again, ensure that the human piece is not missing from it. I think we're going to get into a space pretty soon where, rehab counselors are able to train their own AI models so that they can, again, provide that input and understanding, where the data is coming from, who's collecting it and how often is also really important in this space. We foreshadowed this, and we'll talk in more detail now about the idea of maintaining human oversight and empathy. We distilled from the research data that this is a really important point and an area of concern for lots of rehab professionals. This idea that while AI can propose next steps, it will, offer a whole host of recommendations. We still need to be part of that equation when it comes to making the final recommendation. So always validating, double and triple checking to ensure that the information is accurate, that it aligns with the client's context, preferences, and psychosocial factors is really important. We're in the helping business, in the helping profession, and making sure that we keep that human touch is really important. I think we've all felt that feeling of engaging with an AI chatbot. I'm thinking of, if you're looking for a new car or something, you get the automatic pop-up, and we all know what that feels like to be talking to a robot. And certainly in our field, that's something we want to avoid. So we can use it to help reduce our clerical workload, do all of those administrative functions that we alluded to earlier, with the hope of providing us more time to engage with and develop rapport with our clients. And one of the things that I often talk about in this space is the idea that it takes a long time to train a competent rehabilitation counselor, in this example, at least 6 years. All right, 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of grad school. And we want to be able to do as much of the human work and provide that human touch as much as we possibly can. And our charge here is to help people better understand that we can use it to do some of the more redundant stuff to ensure that we have plenty of rehab counselors to work with people. And then lastly here, this idea of transparency. If you're going to use it, if you're going to have it as part of your clinical treatment planning or aligned with any of those types of tasks, making sure that the stakeholders are well aware of and understand its use. Anything to add here, Chris?
Yeah, just to throw some ideas out there for people to be able to implement it, sooner than later, that don't, conflict with some of the ethical guidelines as that gets worked out. If you have the paid version and you're using ChatGPT 4.0, it's O as like a lowercase zero. Sorry, lowercase O, the letter, not zero. You can say something along the lines of using the internet, please find me 10 customer service jobs in a particular geographic area, and then what it will do is it will scrape the internet and it will then pull that for you. Another idea is to be able to update a resume to reflect a particular job posting. And what I do in particular as well is I always like to teach my people that I'm working with how to use AI as well. In addition, so if I'm teaching them how to prompt and how to use it and interact as I would, what I'm doing is, I'm effectively eliminating myself from the picture. But when I'm gone and I'm no longer providing services, they can then go back to that and use that as a reliable resource to be able to get that resume updated or do a cover letter or do some of the other things that we might help them initially, but they need for sustained use later on in their life.
Yeah, really good point, Chris. So in thinking about the legal and ethical guidelines, we note the CRC code here, but certainly others that fall under the umbrella of helping professions in the rehab world, they're playing catch up, which is often the case when we think about technology. And I've used the example before that I served on the team that helped to write the 2017 Code of Ethics for CRCC. And at that time, there was no mention of the use of social media in the Code of Ethics. And, users, rehab counselors were meant to try and apply existing standards in a space that is very unique and cutting edge at the time. And you'll note that in the 2017 code, we incorporated a whole section on social media use, given its potential, given the potential issues that it can cause in the counseling relationship. Similarly, AI being so cutting edge and even with updated codes, I'm thinking of the 2024 version for CRCC, there was no way they could have envisioned that AI would be this ubiquitous. So our charge is to, ask these organizations to help provide some recommendations or talking points or some guidance on how one might be able to use AI in an ethical way. I suspect we'll see some updated standards moving forward in these professional codes. Similarly, federal and state laws are playing catch up. And as we know, state-specific standards like this Privacy Act in California that we have noted is certainly something that you want to be aware of, and staying up to date and abreast of, all of these legislative changes. Again, it's changing day by day, it seems, and if you are going to be using it, ignorance to these updates is not going to be a good defense should you have any concerns with it. So you'll note, a lot of the professional organizations like ARCA and others are providing these opportunities, which, Chris and I are certainly excited to take part in. So we talked about the ethical challenges related to its implementation. So I'm going to sort of skip over this slide, but again, be considering those comments on privacy and security, some of the concerns regarding bias and fairness, and then these legal and ethical frameworks that we just noted. Anything to add, Chris? We're right at the end of the presentation here, and last comments before we open it up for questions.
I guess if you guys, I know this is a big crowd. If you want to have Paul and I come in and do a virtual presentation, we've been doing the track. We just did IARP last week. We're always available to talk about this in further detail. Just reach out to one of us, and we'd be happy to coordinate. But we are ready and available to get into more depth. It's just given an hour window, there's only so much to talk about. So.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, an hour definitely isn't enough to cover all of this. We hope to be invited back by ARCA and others. That said, we do have several minutes to address any questions that folks might have. And Chris, if you can synthesize those, I don't have the chat in front of me.
Nope, I got it open. So.
Okay. And while he's taking a peek at that, our contact information up on the screen here. As Chris noted, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly, and we do hope that we'll have future opportunities to provide added detail to our presentation.
Dr. Bourgeois, a lot of the comments were, people were really excited about your slides, and they wanted to see if they could get a copy somehow.
Yeah, typically we haven't shared the slides, and largely for some of the reasons that we talked about. Things change so fast that we want to make sure that we're not putting out any outdated information. That said, in the past, Chris will put together sort of a summary version of the slides. I think that's something that we could do here.
And we could totally do that. And we could also provide the GitHub link that we had used for IARP with the resources and everything in there as well, so people can go and access all these tools and be able to use it themselves. So
great.
Yeah, and when Chris says GitHub, it's a tech user platform that has all sorts of resources, and what we'll share has all of those links that we mentioned. And some of those resources that folks might find helpful. Any other questions in there, Chris, that you might think we can address in a couple of minutes?
No, I think Nicole, that's cool. That you the vignettes thing. If she said, great presentation. Just wanted to share that we are currently conducting a study using case vignettes with ChatGPT and asking it for job recommendations and finding some bias in job types it identifies based on the disability type. More food-related jobs, lower wage jobs for vignettes with intellectual disabilities and serious mental illnesses. Yeah, that's awesome. I think doing that is going to definitely help the long-term trajectory. And this is a whole other thing, but basically ChatGPT is trained on reinforcement learning. So if you hit the little thumbs up or the thumbs down button as you're doing it, it helps the AI to understand if it's doing a good job or a bad job. So just keep that in mind when you're using it. It likes a pat on the back.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Diane. I'll be listening this afternoon, and I have a question. I did put it in chat. I'd like to know how does AI affect individuals with disabilities who may be trying to work in the workforce? Will it affect them? And my question as an LLPC, does it take away from being personal? Because if you're speaking a lot of information about a client into AI, I mean, who gets that? Who hears that? I mean, what if the insurance company was to pick up on something like that? What if the client was to listen to it? My theory is the law of confidentiality and how it will help people with disabilities. Those are my questions.
Yeah, so to touch on that, Diane, thank you. For your first question with regards to the effect on people with disabilities, it's not really clear right now. What I will say, though, is what's going on is this natural displacement of individuals in the workforce who don't have a particular skill set, and due to advances in technology, we saw it with, even the telephone operator, right? Back in the day, you used to have to call, somebody would then interject, right? Those jobs don't exist anymore. Really, even operators and switchboard operators don't exist anymore. But what ends up happening is for individuals who demonstrate the ability for, vocational rehabilitation to learn skills, they can then reintegrate into another part of the economy. But this whole displacement thing is not something to really be afraid of. If anything, we can use the skills that we have as vocational counselors to be able to then appropriately try to find alternative jobs. The other question that you had with regards to confidentiality is just use your discretion with regards to how you're using it. If you don't think that it's something that should go in, don't put it in. And the find and replace function on Word is a great thing. So if you have, let's say, Jose Martin as, I'm just using that because I had a case example yesterday. Let's say you have Jose Martin as a name. You go into find and replace and look for Jose, have it replace Jose with John, and then have it replace Martin with Smith. And then boom, you already gotten rid of the names. Whenever you finish something up, all you have to do is just go back into find and replace and take all the Johns and put them back to Jose's, and then take all the Smiths and put them back to Martin. So, we're Paul and I do, present on this quite a bit, and I think at some point we might have to actually do some examples on the screen for people. It's just given the time that we get, we don't have enough time to get really into that much detail. But we are open to putting on workshops to offer some more help and guidance on this.
Yeah, a really good point, Chris. And we're right at time, a minute over. And I'll jump in just to thank ARCA again for providing us the opportunity to talk with all of you today. And as Chris noted, and you see on the screen here, our contact information, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to answer questions, and we hope to be invited back to talk more about this next time. So thank you all again for joining us on a Friday, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, guys.